Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Swapna and this is a third lecture on a marketing research. Let us discuss marketing research process. The first step in a research process is formulating the research problem. The researcher must single out the problem he wants to study. He must decide the general area of interest or the aspect of the subject matter that he would like to inquire into. Hence, the firstly, researcher have to formulate their research problem. The second is the finding basic research issues. There are a number of issues or problems related to the research. These issues need to be analyzed carefully so that they do not hurdles in the research process. Hence, the researcher should find the basic research issue. The third step is developing research hypothesis. The hypothesis it means the preposition which the researcher wants to verify. The role of the hypothesis is to guide the researcher by delineating the area of research and to keep him on the right track. The researcher is an assumption and it is based on a general observation. Now see the characteristics of a good hypothesis. It must be conceptually clear and simple to understand. It should have a variables for the test and judgments. It should address a specific subject under the investigation. An ideal hypothesis must address the objective of the study and it should be related to the variable techniques. The hypothesis should be related to a body of theory. Hypothesis should be based on the investigator's intuition. It should be free from any bias. The hypothesis must address all the possible variables which would be put into a test and the final stage of research. And the hypothesis should not be formulated beyond the scope of the study. The next step is selecting the research method. A method is a tool or a technique used to gather information. It is a procedure for obtaining a knowledge based on empirical observations and a logical reasoning. The different research methods. The first method is a field study method. This is the method which involves a direct study of a field situation. In this method, the subjects are observed and then there is the usual environment conditions of a life rather than the under laboratory conditions. Here, the researcher is direct study the situation on field. The second is an experimental method. In this method, the variables being studied are controlled by the investigator. In other words, the effect of one variable is observed while the other relevant variables are held constant. It generally consists of the laboratory experiments. Next is a survey method. This method involves a systematic study of a particular community or a group and the institution is made for analyzing the problem. A survey or a questionnaire is the most commonly used method to ascertain the views and opinions of customers regarding a new product. Next is the historical method. This method collects the fact by going in the past in different periods. The source of information including the written records, newspaper, diaries, documents, etc. The next is a case study method. It is a studying the phenomenon, event, situation or the development through a detailed analysis. This case may be an individual, a group, a community, a society, an organization, a process, or any unit of the social life. The next is a statistical method. This method involves a drawing a statistical inferences, the generalization about the population through the mathematical values. The statistical inference is based on a probability theory. Hence, the research is completely depends on a certain statistical methods. The next step is a research design. Research design is a detailed plan of how the goals of research will be achieved. It is blueprint or a structural format as to how the research questions will be investigated. See the definition of research design. The research design is the logical and a systematic planning and a directing a price of research. Let us see the needs and the significance of a research design. The first is the research design is needed as it gives a direction to a researcher. The second is a detailed research design prevents a blind searching. A good research design helps the researcher to anticipate a potential problem, and the research design facilitates the researcher to organize his idea, thoughts in a productive flow. Let us see the steps involved in research design. The first step is the specifying the problem or the topic to be studied on the basis of the interest. The second is state the research objectives. Researcher have to decide here the objectives, the research objective. The third step is once the objectives are framed, the next step is to review the available literatures. And the lastly, the framing of hypothesis. The next step is selecting the sample and designing a sampling plan. The question of whom to study, how many the study generally arises in the mind of the researcher. Besides the way of the selecting a sample from the population, the probability and non-probability method. Here the researcher have to decide from whom and from how many people or how many respondents the researcher is collecting the data, and here he has to decide a sampling method also. In short, here the sampling size and the sampling method should be decided. In the next step, it's a collecting the data. After deciding a sampling, the next stage is here the researcher have to select the method of the data collection. Here are the two types of data collection method. The first is the primary data collection and second is a secondary data collection. The next step is an analysis of data. After the data has been collected, the researcher turns to the task of analyzing them. Analysis of data requires a number of closely related operations, such converting the raw data into a suitable course, tabulating them, and then drawing a statistical inferences. After analyzing the data, the next step is a testing of hypothesis. After analyzing the data, the researcher is in a position to test the hypothesis. A various tests such as a chi-square test, t-test, f-test, ANOVA has been developed for the purpose of the testing hypothesis. The next step is generalization and interpretation. If the hypothesis is tested, the researcher can arrive at a generalization, that is, to build a theory. Here, he has to explain properly what he analyzed. So that generalization is known as interpretation. The next step is preparation of the research report. The researcher has to finally prepare the report of what has been researched by him. The report writing must follow the proper layout, that is, preliminary pages, the main text, summary of findings and conclusions. At the end of the reports, the questionnaire, bibliography, and any the important list should be enlisted.